Hi, I'm Betsy. Welcome back to my kitchen. So today what we're going to make is something I make when I've got guests coming over and I really don't feel like doing a whole lot of work. The hardest part about this recipe is cutting apples. So I'm going to make an apple crisp. My mom used to make this when we were growing up, and there's something about it. It is so good, and anything you can use to add ice cream to is good by me. So the hardest part of this one, I said, is cutting the apples. I have this fancy little gadget which sometimes is more helpful, sometimes it's not. But if you have one of these, they're great, but you can always do this by hand. So with my fancy little gadget, this will peel my apples pretty quickly. The downside of this, you will see in a second, is there's a lot of waste. So it's really good at peeling the apple, but when I go to cut the apple, I have to just cut it off. Well, I'm leaving a lot on the core here. So what I get in speed, I sacrifice in apple. So that's one way to do it. The other way is just the old-fashioned way, and to cut an apple. It just takes a lot longer. So for that one, I just quarter it, cut the center out, and then peel it as close to the skin as I can. Get a lot more apple when I do it that way, but it takes a lot longer. Okay, so just give me a second. Okay, so I find this incredibly fun and a little creepy all at the same time. The rule of thumb when you're cutting apples, you'll get about a cup per apple, and I need 10 cups of apples for this. So I'm going to start cutting them. You can see it leaves a little skin. The only time you have to worry about it is if you got a big piece like that. Otherwise, a little skin in here is not going to hurt anything. Okay, now when I go to cut these, you don't need real small pieces, and they don't even have to be that uniform. I'm looking for just chunks of apple. I've got quite a few different sizes, but just chunks of apple, and I need 10 cups of those. Okay, so this is about my 10 cups. Once I get the 10 cups in there, I am going to add some sugars to make this nice and sweet. So with this, we're going to use a half a cup of brown sugar. I'm going to pack that in there. 1 cup of regular sugar. Quarter cup of flour. That'll just thicken it up a little bit. And 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon. Now, you can never have too much cinnamon, so I wouldn't even worry about how precise you are with this one. All right, once we get that in there, we have to mix this, and it can be a problem. You can just use your hands if you're comfortable doing that. It's probably the easiest way. Otherwise, just be gentle. Otherwise, things are going to fly. All we're trying to do is make sure all the apples get mixed. We want a little cinnamon sugar on all of them. The last thing I'm going to add is just a teeny little pinch of salt and get that mixed in. That'll help the apples juice a little bit. Okay, once we get that mixed, we're going to put it in a pan. You can use a 9x13 cake pan. Any pan about that size will be fine. Spray it up a little bit. This gets real, I'm not going to say soupy because it's not runny, but spraying the pan helps a little. It's still going to stick to the pan. Really caramely on the bottom. And then we're just going to put the apples in there. And it's going to look like we have way too many apples, but they're going to bake way down. if you get to the bottom and you end up, I didn't this time, but sometimes when you get to the bottom, you'll find a whole bunch of sugar that didn't get mixed in. Just make sure you pour it over the top evenly so that when it bakes, it all is even. The next thing is we're just gonna make the topping to go on top of it. For this, we just need the mixer. And this is probably the simplest recipe to remember because it's just a cup of everything. 1 cup of butter. And this is softened butter. This one really has to be soft. So make sure you let this one sit out for, a good 2 to 3 hours. 1 cup of sugar. 1 cup of flour. And 1 cup of oatmeal. Now, I get asked whether it should be quick oats or whether it should be old-fashioned oats. Doesn't matter. The difference is the old-fashioned oats are bigger. I think for an apple crisp that looks nice, but if what you've got in the cupboard is the quick oats, it's gonna work just fine. Oh, and again, I throw stuff. That's becoming a theme, isn't it? Okay, once we have this, we're just gonna put it on the mixer and just get that blended. All we're looking for that is to be blended and kind of crumbly. All we're gonna do is put that over the top. Okay, so the one last thing we have to add to the topping is some cinnamon, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. All we're gonna do is put that over the top. So once I've got that all mixed up and ready to go, the last thing I'm gonna do is go back to my apples and add 1 tablespoon of butter, but in just small little pieces. So I just cut them up and I'm just gonna add these little pieces of butter on the top. Because how in the world is it not better by doing this? Oh, all's right in the world. Okay, then I take my topping and just crumble it over the top. Just try to make it even so every scoop of this ends up with apples and topping. Oh, this makes me so happy. It's not even cooked and it makes me happy. Seriously, it's like I'm 12 years old back home. My mom's doing this right now. I can smell it. Life was good. And we're gonna put this in the oven to bake. It's gonna bake at 350 degrees. I'm gonna say put it in for at least 35 minutes and check it, but I typically bake this 45 to 50 minutes. The way you're gonna know this is done is when you start to see the apples bubbling around the edge, bubbling up that caramel. That's when it's done. So I would also recommend you bake this on a baking sheet because it can want to boil over sometimes, so you don't want to have to clean your oven afterwards. So put this in the oven for 350 degrees for at least 35, check it at 35, but probably 45 to 50 minutes. And this is going to come out and be just amazing. So this is the finished product. This is the exact same amount of apples as I put in the oven, and you saw that when it was mounded up. This is how it's going to bake down. I'll tell you, this isn't the most attractive looking thing, but I don't care about that. This scooped into a bowl, apples and topping. Okay, so this with a little ice cream, that screams fall, and your guests will love it. I'm not even gonna wait till you leave before I start eating this, but I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I have my whole life. With some ice cream on it, nice and warm. Oh, we gotta do that over. Man down.